Hello, everyone. This is Adlane, Fellah, Chief Analyst Maravedis. Welcome to this new episode of Industry Shakers. Today, I have the pleasure of welcoming Tobin Richardson, who's the President and CEO at Connectivity Standards Alliance. Hello, Tobin. How are you today?
Hey, Adlane. Great. How are you doing?
I'm great. And thanks for joining us today. Now, I'll refer your organization as CSA. It's going to be much easier. So, can you remind the viewers who is the CSA and what its mission is?
Yeah, you bet. We call it the Alliance, and so that's how we kind of describe it. And it's a great community that's been around for more than 22 years. And we started off in low power, low data rate wireless networks around Zigbee. And since then, we've grown to really kind of involve companies, hundreds of them around the world, to create standards for the Internet of Things. And that really plays across the whole IoT landscape, but especially for smart home, smart building, getting into smart city. And really effectively what the Alliance is a global not-for-profit organization similar to our sister organizations like the Wi-Fi Alliance, Thread Group, Bluetooth SIG. And our part in all this is both through Matter on top of IP-based standards. So the organization itself, it's a place where companies come together, agree on what the standards are. We put together a certification program and a logoing program behind that. And we continue to iterate, learn from the implementations, try to bring into the market certainty and surety around that brand, that anything carrying the Zigbee brand or the logo brand is going to interoperate with other devices the way that consumers will expect it to. And we've been really fortunate to have over 1 billion devices on the Zigbee side. We know that on the Matter side, that number is quickly growing, and we know we'll effectively be in almost every smart home on the planet in the next 5 to 10 years. So we're, again, very fortunate to have more than 800 companies in almost 50 countries from around the world. And what I call one of the best engineering teams on the planet, more than 9,000 people from all those different companies contributing to this global effort on open source and open standards for the Internet of Things.
Yeah, your work is very important given fragmentation or traditional fragmentation of IoT space, which kind of hindered its adoption in many ways. Now, just as a curiosity, you have 800 members, but like in most associations, you already have a bunch of companies that are kind of leading the work. Are you comfortable giving us some examples of who are the most active vendors out there?
Yeah, they're different companies play different roles in the creating markets around open standards. Some of those will simply just build a product, and you need those. And then some will invest, hundreds of hours, millions of dollars in engineering time and effort. And we have those companies as well. An easy place to look is our board of directors. We have one of the largest boards in the industry. And I think that's representative of how important the Internet of Things is, but also how difficult it is to get all this to work and that level of investments needed. So if you look at our board members, it includes for Matter, a lot of those companies that are both the ecosystems. So that's Apple, Amazon, Google, Samsung, Oppo, and others, and Huawei, but then also device manufacturers, right? So it is not simply a matter of getting everything to work with a controller, but getting all the devices to speak intelligently to each other. And so it's this great marriage of really device understanding and know-how and network understanding and know-how. And so we have some of the world's leading consumer electronics brands on the board and in the Alliance itself. Hard to point to just one because, whether it's a lock manufacturer, thermostat manufacturer, and lighting, you can expect that if we have a category covered in Matter, we have the world's leading manufacturers participating and driving the definition of those device types and how they interact. And if you look at our member list, it is really kind of a who's who in terms of market leaders on that side, as well as, folks that are simply just building a, relatively simple product on that side.
Yeah, I understand completely. Hi, everyone. This is Adlane Fellah, Chief Analyst at Maravedis Research. I'm very excited today to present to you our new MDU Connectivity Research Annual Subscription Service for 2025-2026, starting Q4 2025. The service comprises a number of deliverables, starting with the quarterly research reports focusing on each of the sub-segments composing the MDU market. Each quarterly research reports will be followed by a client-only analyst briefing to answer any questions you may have. Optionally, you can also get access to 2 Maravedis Market Score reports, one dedicated to MSPs and the other to wireless LAN vendors that are combining information from NPS score and market sentiment. Those are very unique because they're specific to MDU and information is coming from online surveys from the market. And finally, you get access to ongoing support throughout the year with me. Thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to answering any further questions. Now, I know you have been very busy with significant updates that were released recently, including Matter 1.4.2, for which I wrote a blog. What can you tell us about those latest updates?
Yeah, you're not kidding. Standards work sometimes takes, several years. I think in the last 12 to 15 months, our members have released 3 updates to Matter, which gives you an idea for kind of the intense level of investment and work that's going on to really improve adoption and get Matter to a really good place. As you said, we're at 1.4.2, so that represents kind of our incremental release approach. And this year in 2025 is really a lot of the focus has been around quality and security and increasing and improving that base foundation for mainstream adoption. So we're into almost 3 years in the wild with Matter. And so we've learned a lot, right? And our members have learned a lot in implementation, and they're bringing that back into the incremental releases. And as I look at that, from kind of this position, it is really about what are the things that we know and learned in the early implementations, how can we improve things? And you'll see this in 1.4.2, 1.4.1, of course, and even back into 1.4.0, where you have some of the improvements on security. That was a good focus in 1.4.2 and 1.4.1. We focused more on the setup experience, so making it easier to commission devices, also naming and sharing and group devices, while also improving on the multi-admin experience. And so those were things that, as we look at how devices are interoperating and interacting in the real world, the member companies bring that into the spec and improve that. Back in 1.4.0, there was a focus on kind of really starting to bring energy management in. So kind of a newer, but not necessarily newer in general, but for the Matter standard, spotlight on energy management. And then also more support for home routers and access points. So again, really, it has really been about this notion of making sure that devices work really well in the spec itself and learning from those commissioning things that we see kind of how devices sit on a network, whether they fall off, how fast they're able to come back on and effectively rediscover. And so we've worked also with partner groups like the Thread Group on thread commissioning. And so a lot of, like you said, there's been a lot of work and very busy time for the members on bringing in really a focus on quality, expanding the device categories too.
Okay, thank you. And alongside the Matter 1.4.2, there's a new Wi-Fi Alliance certification process. Yeah. What about the CSA's overall vision of certification to make it easier for all of these manufacturers to participate?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that question. That's something that we keep close tabs on, right? So typically with standards, you will see with new iterations, companies will need to go get recertified or certified up to that latest edition. And so as we recognized how fast we're going and how important it is to be that timely, which is fine, we want to reduce the complexity, we want to reduce the cost to companies to go through this. These processes aren't free, so we need to make sure that we're capturing enough revenue to manage those. But we wanted to take kind of different approaches to, how can we, one, make the process easier. So we're doing things in the process to adapt kind of how we process certifications, which is probably too in-depth for this, but it's really important for product manufacturers that when they engage with us, it's simple to understand how to upload test results into a tool, get through that process, have good visibility. So we've taken some immediate steps to improve that. And we're also looking at systemically, somewhat fundamentally changing how we think about certification. So there's some work there. We created a fast track recertification program and also introduced a portfolio product family cert. So this is two important parts here. One, if I have a single SKU or relatively thousands of SKUs, but it's really the same Matter node, can I just simply certify the whole product family so that because there's nothing really inherently different about that certification in these different SKUs if there's just different colored refrigerators, for example. Mm-hmm. And so we enabled that. That's, I think, landed really well. But that fast track recertification, I think, is one of the more important ones, because what it means is that if companies were sitting on the sidelines with their 1.0 or 1.1 certification and just kind of waiting because they don't want to pay the certification fee, we've effectively made that free. We just want everybody getting up to the latest code base, bringing their products up to the latest rev. so that they're getting advantage of all the learnings that we've had in terms of the quality of the deployments. That's what it's all about. So that's something that the board of directors approved earlier this year. We've seen a lot of good uptake of that, and we're seeing a lot of products really coming into the fold that may otherwise have been just simply sitting, with an older code base. So these are important because, these are manufacturers that have to consider, their total BOM costs. They have to consider the time and the effort needed to bring this up. Everybody wants to be fully interoperable. They want to have full feature. They want to be able to talk to every controller. So we know we have an important role in that. So we're taking down the hurdles as fast as we can to enable that and ensure that we're taking the right steps. And you mentioned already, of course, the Wi-Fi for Matter certification. So we're getting much more deep into our relationships and friendships with the Wi-Fi Alliance, with a thread group, even the Bluetooth SIG. We all serve the same companies, right? So how can we make this as easy as possible and as transparent as possible? I think we made some really good steps. I think we still have some more that we can do in the months ahead to make it even easier.
Just a quick question on the code base you mentioned. Is that like an open source, a library of code that's sitting somewhere that people can access, but then there's a control mechanism so that people don't screw up the code?
Yeah, so one of the important elements for Matter that we were really excited to introduce is this notion of a reference implementation. And so through GitHub, we have a GitHub repository. You have a reference implementation of the code base that you can use. Of course, you can use whatever code you want to, but this is effectively one that is being used and developed live and real time by a number of developers to really reflect what's in the standard and what's in the specification. And it gives folks both a leg up, but also a reference to see how the code's working, in that sense for the implementation of the standard.
Okay. Cool. But let's talk about adoption now. What trends are you seeing? Who's adopting Matter, and how is that ecosystem expanding?
Yeah, it's so of course from the Alliance side, we're just the standards part of the equation. In terms of the actual products themselves, that's up to the manufacturers. So we track some of this. We can see what everybody else sees, and we definitely pay attention to what's happening. We also work with some analyst firms on the market uptake side. And so, it's been great to see just over the last 12 months, a lot of really good momentum. In terms of measuring, we see, a significant increase and a high volume in terms of the products that are being certified. So the ones that are coming through our process, that's great. Also, anecdotally, what we see at trade shows, what we see on product announcements, on the news, we see, a great deal of momentum. There have been some great announcements from some big brands just recently at IFA in Berlin. Signify did a huge release in terms of what they're going to do with Zigbee, as well as with Matter, and really getting behind more deployments there. So that will be a huge impact. We've seen other really important announcements from companies like IKEA. And so this is a brand that, people who are not looking for technology, just looking for great user experiences in their home furnishings, now have Matter available in a number of devices in IKEA. So that'll take time to roll out in all their stores, I'm sure. But those, I think we're starting to see Matter now really available in folks in their everyday interactions is a really good sign. It's a really good indicator of how mainstream Matter is getting. So we're really excited to see that. And then there are so many other companies like Level, GE, Kwikset, Akera, and the list goes on in terms of really good validation points for companies bringing in point devices. Like here, I've got my one device, it'll work with everybody else. And also others really coming up with services around that. So again, really good momentum on the Matter side, and in all the major categories of products that are supported by the standard today.
Yeah, I'll make sure to watch for that at my next visit to IKEA for some Matter science.
Yeah, no, they have some cool stuff in there. I go there every now and then, and
Okay.
it is your local stores, whether it's Target in the US or Lidl in Europe, et cetera. It's great to see these. Great to see the Matter logo.
Cool. So what about specifically the smart home experience, and where is CSA prioritizing adoption? Because there's so many ways or so many use cases possible. Do you have any clear vision for that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and one that, one of the benefits of being a member-driven organization is that you are seeing both where companies want to build markets and where they want to standardize. And so we've always really been kind of a use case driven, organization. Products, features aren't going to get in unless they're supported by at least 3 companies, because they think that there's a market for that, right? And so they are bringing in those things that should be standardized and just foundational. And and then they're going to go compete on the innovation on things like this. So just this week, we've heard a lot of focus on AI and ambient experiences through the Google and Amazon announcements around their product suites. And this is, I think, just right in line with what we're seeing with those smart home experiences. We know that in order for everything to work, it has to be turned on. Then it has to be able to connect with each other. Then it has to be able to have some kind of meaningful interaction. Okay, we're still talking about point-to-point interaction. When do we get to the point where there are just experiences happening in the background? With the introduction of large language models and how companies are using that in their smart experiences, we're getting past then. We're going to get past just the simple algorithms or the simple rules based to really thoughtful experiences and that ambient experience. So Matter forms a really important basis for all that, which is great. And so now I think we can have all of these devices connected, talking to each other, intelligently understanding their capabilities, and then letting these AI agents, whether that's simply just asking, prompted by a user to say, hey, it's morning, please, good morning, right? And then there's a rule in the background, but being intelligent in that side. So this is all really cool. So what are we prioritizing, and what our members are prioritizing is still really that making sure that the quality is and the basics are done really, really well. And so that's something that we're still focused on in 2025. And I think you'll still see that as a really important function in 2026, because those advanced needs will really pull on the capabilities and the network dynamics, whether it's Wi-Fi or Thread, that support those experiences. So things like latency, the ability to have multiple devices on a single network and be able to touch them, and with low latency, and many other pieces. So that will continue to be a focus there, I think, for our members. And then looking at additional device types that kind of round out. And of course, we know cameras is probably the last big main category of device type that isn't yet in there, and we expect that to be resolved pretty soon. A lot of the Tiger teams working on that today. So those are some of the things in terms of the home experience. As a user expects everything to be connected and work with each other, this is something that we know is a problem that needs to be solved, and Matter solves a lot of that. So again, good quality focus, good foundation for AI experiences, and then as well looking at cameras, and then I think we'll see some more in terms of energy management and other areas too. But those are two key areas.
Okay. Now from there, the natural progression is the multifamily, multi-dwelling units on one side, and then potentially commercial applications. And I'm thinking naturally, like for example, a hospitality is a great example of that being part of the guest experience. What's your vision for these particular developments?
Yeah, I'm really excited about those, because I think the use of technology, the use of connected devices and experiences wherever we go, and carrying that with us is really possible through Matter and the innovation that happens on top. So Matter will help support some of that. Some of the access control through Aliro, using your phone for that, will also be an important element there. So I think our members have really intelligently put together kind of the main use cases that bring that support in. So Aliro will be launched in the next several months. That'll get us into the kind of the access control area in an intelligent way. But then as we look at how Matter could be used in those individual experiences, it's a device-to-device protocol. It has a lot of robust features around that. So then being able to tie that into cloud-based services, being able to turn that into, this is Adlane's room, and so I'm going to put all of his preferences. How do I carry that preference list with me and populate it locally, and then also then leave and then take that with me so it doesn't sit behind? So these are some of the areas that Tiger teams are looking at in general. But if we look then at the multi-dwelling unit component of this, which is if you've got a new build of a building of 100 units, they're going to be apartments, they're going to have 20 different devices. I want to go in and populate each apartment with those 20 devices, make sure they're all on the same network, and then leave. Well, that's, how do I, commission all those? So those are some things we're looking at. How do you mass commission, hundreds of devices at once without using a QR code or some of the more manual processes that are in place now? So that's something Tiger teams are looking at in the Alliance and the Matter working group. The second is, how do I hand permissions over to somebody? If I'm an installer, are there tools that I should be using that are unique and helpful in the Matter implementation? Are there ways that I handle permissions as I set up the credentials, and then leave those credentials in a way that can be handed off to the new tenant or the new building owner? So those are areas that the Tiger teams are evaluating right now. We have, a few different ways of organizing work within the Alliance. both within our technical working group, but then also Tiger teams inside that, as well as kind of market areas. And we have a group called Pro Home and Building that is specifically looking at some of these use cases and these architectural elements to understand what's the best way to tackle this so that we can get the value of matter into those multi-dwelling units. And there's a lot of interest. I know we will see some near-term implementations around the world. Matter is already being used in MDUs, which is cool. But then figuring out, are they just kind of piecing that together, or is there a way to do this so we can do that at scale? So again, like you said, it's an exciting area, and I think can be really meaningful for user experiences.
Yeah, I agree. It's a huge opportunity. I still think it's not very much known in the MDU space. I don't hear when I talk to property owners or managed service providers, and I don't, they hear Matter for the first time. So I think there's a lot of education to be done there, in my opinion.
Yeah, we've had a real strong focus on, let's say, do it yourself and things that people buy directly versus do it for me, installer networks, things like that. And I think, that's something that we'll spend more time educating that market and making sure, not just educating them, but bringing them into the fold and saying, look, come in and help define, this is a useful tool that solves real problems. Come on inside and help define, credential sharing and everything else that needs to happen.
Yeah, no, it's super important especially on for uptech and improving the operational efficiency of the building is really comes down to the bottom line for them. So very excited to follow up with that. So last question, because I know we could be talking for hours, but the audience has limited time. So future direction, looking ahead, what are the biggest challenges, opportunities you see for Matter and the broader IoT industry?
Yeah, you talked about it earlier, which was fragmentation, right? IoT has long been fragmented. The internet was fragmented for a long time. Finally, with open standards, the embrace of open standards, TCP/IP, several steps that helped bring the internet to the masses and also for other use. I think we see the same thing in the IoT, Internet of Things, and the different use case areas. So I think as we look at our challenges, they are really to help bring people together onto a platform of open standards. That's where IP is so important, but then also Matter, right? So if you think about those two pieces, I think really once embraced writ large across all of these different use case areas, whether smart home, smart building, that's where we're going to see a lot of good new value being delivered, as well as what you talked about in terms of the OpEx for managing these. Managing complex systems, not standards-based, is going to be more expensive. So we know that this is going to be the direction. So the two areas for the future for us, I think, are around how to enable that, looking at how, let's say, data gets used both locally and for the right owner of that information. And that may be a user living in a house, it may be a building owner, it may be a systems owner. And so working on how data is managed it's a new Tiger team that we've just created recently from the strategy committee of the board. That's how important it is. And so I look forward to kind of seeing how we tackle that so that we're making sure that the Matter goes on that trajectory, that we address that correctly, so that all of the players and actors that you talked about can value that and use that. And then the second is really on AI and edge capabilities. And I think that's, as we look at supporting what we talked about earlier, the growing impact of AI and machine learning, there's a lot that can be used and done within Matter to support that. So again, looking at the future, making sure that we do a really good job on quality and getting the basics right. And we're still working on that, which is great. But then looking at how this can be used in so many different areas in a way that's scalable. So again, I think a really exciting time for us.
Okay. So if people want to meet you, do you guys have any events or conferences that people can attend if they're not a member? Or
and a great way is to join our member meetings. So become a member. We have low cost ways to get involved, or if you want to get into writing and crafting the scripts. So we have a member meeting coming up in November in Barcelona. Okay. So that is a great place to meet a lot of the members, and that's the second week of November. So that's a great way to see what's going on in the Alliance, what's going on in Matter, and meet hundreds and hundreds of companies and individuals driving the future of the smart home and IoT.
Yeah, it's a great time compared to being in Barcelona during the Mobile World Congress, where the whole city is invaded by all the conference participants. It's been a pleasure, Tobin. Thank you very much for answering my questions. To the audience, please don't forget to subscribe, like, share, as usual, and hoping to meet you in person one of these days.
Look forward to it. Thanks so much for a great conversation, Adlane.
Thank you, Tobin.